the training. It's completed. Good. Now, I have asked in the previous phrase was, what is the radius of Saturn? Now, it's not a big deal if the user is going to type in the exact phrase. That is the exact set of words you see here, and if Dialogflow is able to do the mapping. I wouldn't say it's a big deal, because it's simply a question of like a string matching kind of a task. However, what Dialogflow is really good at is, based on these three phrases which you've defined here, and you can have more, you can have a lot of training phrases. Dialogflow recommends that you use about 10 to 15 for good results. What it can do based on these training phrases is that it can take the patterns that it sees here, and it can handle similar wording even if it is not exactly the same. Now, in this case, it's kind of pretty simple to see that the radius of Saturn phrase is appearing in all the training phrases that we have provided. What that means is, if we use radius of Saturn in the question that the user is going to ask, you do expect that Dialogflow is able to map it to this particular intent. So let's just think of a word which is a phrase which contains the radius of Saturn but also has some little difference to these existing training phrases. I might be saying something like, show me the radius of Saturn. And you can see that, as we expected, it came back with the response you asked for the radius of Saturn, which is what we've defined here. And this is good, because it says that if the user were to slightly modify their query but include the main words that Dialogflow is expecting, it is still able to respond with the correct intent. Now remember, when we go back to this list of intents here, and even based on the behavior you saw before we declared this intent, if I were to ask this question, it would have gone to the fallback because we had no way to handle it before. But now, after declaring this intent, there is a way for Dialogflow to handle this user's phrase. So that's the basic idea of what an intent is. And just to make it a bit more clear, I'm going to add one more. Say user asks for color of Saturn. And let's add these training phrases. What is the color of Saturn? Tell me the color of Saturn, and so on. And here the response will simply be, you asked for the color of Saturn. Let's save it. And as usual, as soon as you do the save, it is going to start the training. And you can see that the icon here starts spinning. And we have to wait for a few seconds for the training to get completed. And as soon as the training gets completed, it's ready to handle the latest changes that you made. That's basically what it means. The training here means that whatever change that you just recently did, once it says, this wheel stops spinning and you see the message over here down at the bottom right that the training has been completed, it means that all the most recent changes are now in effect and you are now ready to test your chatbot out. So let's wait for a couple more seconds for it to complete its training. All right, so it now says that the training is completed. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, show me the color of Saturn. And as you know, we haven't actually used that specific phrase in this training phrase. And the other thing that you might also notice is that it's quite similar to the user says we had used before, which actually got mapped to the radius of Saturn intent. So we have to see what happens when we type this. So you can see that it is able to map it to the newly defined intent, which is user asks for color of Saturn, and which already shows you a couple of things. First of all, even though the phrase is very close to what the user had typed the last time, where they said show me the radius of Saturn, and here I've changed only one word, just I changed the word radius to the word color, you can see that Dialogflow is not actually getting confused. It is able to still properly distinguish what the user said, and it has made sure that it has selected the correct intent based on what the user's actual intention was. Now, this is a basic introduction to what intents are, and let's just take a quick look at the list of intents we have. So we have these 4, and based on what the user types, it is going to select one of these 4. And now this is a good example. Like if I were to say what is the let's say what is the volume of Saturn. So now this is actually interesting, because you notice that it still went to the user asked for radius of Saturn intent, and I'll give an explanation of this later on, but it's just something which is it's a good thing for you to keep in mind, and keep thinking about and consider what might be going on over here. And we will come back to this in a future lesson. And for now, this just ends this lesson, and we will be moving on to the next concept.